Every morning, the words you speak upon waking hold the power to either propel you toward financial abundance or keep you trapped in a cycle of scarcity. These words are not just idle chatter or casual expressions, they are the very tools you use to construct your reality. Imagine if you had a loaded weapon in your mouth, capable of either building wealth or destroying it with every syllable. This is not a metaphor. It is a profound truth rooted in both spiritual principles and quantum physics. The universe responds to the frequency of your words, and what you declare becomes the blueprint for your financial destiny. For centuries, we've been taught that wealth is earned through hard work, education, and strategic investments. But what if the real secret to financial freedom lies not in external effort, but in the words you speak? The ancient mystics understood this, and modern science is now catching up. Quantum physics reveals that reality is shaped by observation and intention, and your words carry the same creative force that brought the universe into existence. When you speak, you are not merely describing your current circumstances, you are programming the invisible realm, where all possibilities exist. Consider the words you use most frequently. Do you often say, "I can't afford that," "I'm struggling financially," or "money is tight"? These statements may feel like harmless descriptions of reality, but they are actually powerful decrees that reinforce limitation. Every time you speak about lack, you are issuing a command to the universe to maintain that very condition. Conversely, when you declare abundance, prosperity, and divine supply, you are aligning yourself with the infinite wealth that already exists in the spiritual dimension. The key to unlocking financial breakthrough lies in recognizing that your words are not just reflections of your current state. They are the very mechanism through which you shape your future. The moment you shift from speaking from fear to speaking from faith, from describing struggle to declaring abundance, you begin to align with the divine laws that govern creation. This is not about positive thinking or wishful thinking. It is about understanding that your words carry the same authority as the divine command. Let there be light. As we delve deeper into this revelation, you will discover how to harness the creative power of your speech, how to reprogram your financial reality, and how to step into the wealth that has always been yours. The journey begins with recognizing the immense power behind every word you speak, and how, with the right declarations, you can transform your financial destiny forever. At the heart of this revelation lies a groundbreaking truth. Every word you speak is a command that programs your financial reality. This principle was first articulated over a century ago by Florence Scovel Shinn, a pioneering spiritual teacher who understood that human speech is not merely a tool for communication, but a divine mechanism for creation. She recognized that the universe responds to the authority of spoken words, and that what you declare becomes your lived experience. This insight aligns with the latest discoveries in quantum physics, which reveal that reality is not fixed but fluid, shaped by observation, intention, and energy. Your words, infused with intention, act as a kind of spiritual programming that instructs the universe to manifest what you declare. Consider the implications of this truth. Every time you say, "I can't afford that," you are not simply describing your current financial state. You are instructing the universe to maintain that condition. When you complain about bills or joke about being broke, you are reinforcing a reality of lack rather than abundance. The words you speak are not passive. They are active forces that shape the invisible realm, where all financial possibilities exist. This is not wishful thinking or motivational rhetoric. It is a spiritual and scientific law. Just as quantum physicists have demonstrated that particles respond to observation, spiritual laws reveal that your spoken words activate the unseen forces that determine your financial reality. The universe does not distinguish between what you want and what you fear. It simply responds to the authority behind your words. When you declare, I am struggling, you are using the same creative power that God used to speak light into darkness. When you say, I can't make ends meet, you are reinforcing a reality of financial limitation rather than abundance. But here's the breakthrough. The same power that has been maintaining your current financial situation can be redirected to create a new one. The moment you shift from speaking from fear to speaking from faith, from describing lack to declaring abundance, you begin to align with the divine laws that govern creation. This understanding transforms your relationship with money forever. You are no longer a passive observer of financial circumstances, but an active creator of your reality. Your words are not just expressions of your current state. They are the very mechanism through which you shape your future. By mastering the power of your speech, you gain access to the same creative force that built galaxies and formed mountains. The journey ahead will reveal how to harness this power deliberately and systematically, unlocking the wealth that has always been yours. At the core of this transformative principle lies the phrase, I am. A declaration that holds unparalleled creative power. When Moses encountered the burning bush and asked for God's name, the response was not a mere label or title. It was a revelation of the fundamental force that governs all creation. I am that I am. This wasn't a poetic expression or symbolic metaphor. It was the divine password to the universe, the key that unlocks the infinite potential of existence. Every time you say, I am, you are tapping into that same creative authority, stepping into the very mechanism that shaped the cosmos. The significance of I am goes beyond mere self-expression. It is a declaration of identity, a statement of being that carries the weight of divine law. When you say, I am wealthy, you are not expressing a desire or stating a goal. You are exercising the same authority that spoke galaxies into existence. The universe does not distinguish between what you want and what you declare. It simply responds to the command behind your words. If you say, I am broke, you are using divine power to maintain a state of lack. If you say, I am struggling, you are reinforcing limitation with the same force that created the stars. But if you say, I am supplied, I am prosperous, or I am abundant, you are aligning yourself with the infinite wealth that already exists in the spiritual realm. The problem is that most people have been unconsciously using this power in reverse. They speak their fears instead of their faith, their problems instead of their provision, their current limitations instead of their divine identity. They declare struggle when they should be declaring abundance, describe lack when they should be affirming supply. The result is a reality that reflects their spoken words, rather than their true spiritual nature. But the moment you recognize the authority behind, I am, everything changes. You stop describing your circumstances and start declaring your reality. You stop identifying with lack and start aligning with abundance. This revelation is not about positive thinking or self-help affirmations. It is about understanding that your words carry the same creative force that God used to bring light into darkness. When you speak from the authority of, I am, you are not merely hoping for change, you are commanding it. You are stepping into the same divine blueprint that already exists in the invisible realm, bringing it into manifestation through the power of your voice. The journey ahead will reveal how to harness this authority intentionally, how to shift from speaking from limitation to speaking from abundance, and how to align your words with the wealth that has always been yours. For years, people have been taught that financial success comes from external strategies: budgeting, investing, networking, and working harder. But what if the real problem isn't a lack of effort or knowledge, but a misalignment between your inner world and your financial reality? The truth is, you cannot solve a spiritual issue with physical solutions. No matter how many financial books you read, how many side hustles you start, or how many budget spreadsheets you create. If your words and beliefs are not aligned with abundance, you will continue to experience limitation. This is where the journey must begin, not with more action, but with a deeper understanding of who you are beyond your circumstances. The gap between where you are financially and where you want to be is not a gap of time, effort, or external resources. It is a gap of alignment between what you say, what you believe, and what heaven already knows to be true about you. The moment you begin speaking from your divine identity, rather than your current limitations, you start closing that gap. The traditional mindset says, I need to work harder to earn more money. The spiritual truth says, I am already wealthy in the invisible realm, and I am now allowing my spoken words to catch up with that reality. This is not wishful thinking or delusion. It is a shift in consciousness that aligns you with the abundance that already exists in the spiritual dimension. When you speak from that place of alignment, you are not trying to create wealth. You are allowing it to manifest in your physical experience. This revelation changes everything. Instead of chasing opportunities, you begin attracting them. Instead of begging for provision, you start commanding it. Instead of hoping for financial breakthrough, you begin decreeing it. The universe is not waiting for you to earn or deserve abundance. It is waiting for you to speak it into existence. Every dollar, every contract, every opportunity that will ever flow into your life is already complete in the invisible warehouse of divine supply. The only thing standing between you and that wealth is the way you speak about it. When you stop speaking from lack and start speaking from abundance, you shift from being a victim of circumstance to a creator of reality. You stop describing your financial struggles and start declaring your prosperity. You stop identifying with poverty and start aligning with your true spiritual identity. The moment you do this, something shifts in the atmosphere around you. People begin responding differently. Opportunities start appearing. Money begins flowing through channels you never anticipated. Not because you've suddenly become smarter or luckier, but because you've aligned your words with the divine truth of who you already are. This is the missing piece so many people overlook. It's not about working harder or finding the right investment strategy. It's about recognizing that your words have creative power. The moment you speak from your divine identity, you begin to dismantle the limitations you've been unknowingly reinforcing through your speech. You stop speaking from fear and start speaking from faith. You stop describing struggle and start declaring abundance. And in that shift, your financial reality begins to transform. Most people walk through life completely unaware of how their unconscious speech patterns are shaping their financial reality. Every casual comment about money, every sarcastic joke about being broke, every offhand complaint about expenses is not just idle conversation. It is a spiritual command that reinforces limitation. These seemingly harmless phrases are actually powerful incantations that maintain the very financial struggles people desperately want to escape. Consider the frequency with which people say things like, I can't afford that. Money doesn't grow on trees. Or, I'm barely making ends meet. These statements may feel like simple descriptions of reality, but in the realm of divine law, they are legislative decrees. The universe does not distinguish between what you want and what you declare. It simply responds to the authority behind your words. When you speak from lack, you are programming your reality to maintain that state. Even seemingly positive statements can be laced with unconscious sabotage. Phrases like, I hope I can pay my bills this month, or, I'm trying to improve my financial situation, may appear hopeful, but they still reinforce a reality of struggle. The word, hope, implies uncertainty, and the word, trying, suggests effort without guaranteed results. Instead of declaring abundance, these statements reinforce the idea that financial stability is something you must work toward, rather than something you already possess. In the spiritual realm, the cumulative effect of these unconscious declarations is staggering. Over time, they create a spiritual contract with lack, a self-imposed agreement that keeps abundance at bay. Every time you say, "I don't have enough money," you are not describing your current bank balance. You are issuing a command that maintains that condition. Every time you joke about being poor or complain about expenses, you are unknowingly reinforcing a reality of financial struggle. The problem is that most people have inherited these speech patterns from their families, cultures, and environments. Generations of poverty consciousness have been passed down through casual conversations about money, creating a cycle that keeps people trapped in financial limitation. But the good news is that the same power that created these unconscious agreements can be used to dissolve them. The key is awareness. The moment you begin recognizing the impact of your words, you gain the ability to shift them. Instead of reinforcing lack, you can start declaring abundance. Instead of unconsciously maintaining poverty, you can consciously command prosperity. This is not about pretending your circumstances don't exist. It is about understanding that your words carry creative authority and choosing to use them to build the financial reality you truly desire. The first step in transforming your financial reality is recognizing that your words have creative power. Once you understand that your speech is not just describing your current circumstances, but actively programming your future, you can begin the process of intentional declaration. This means consciously choosing to speak from your divine identity rather than your current limitations. It is not about denying reality, but about shifting your perspective to align with the truth of who you are in the spiritual realm. Start by identifying the phrases that have been reinforcing limitation in your life. How often do you say, "I can't afford that," "I'm struggling financially," or "money is tight"? These statements may feel like harmless descriptions of reality, but they are actually powerful decrees that maintain your current financial state. Replace these with declarations that align with abundance, such as, "I am abundantly supplied," "I walk in rivers of money," or "I am a magnet for financial opportunity." A powerful practice is to begin each day with a morning declaration that sets the tone for your financial reality. Before you check your bank account, before you review your bills, and before you let external circumstances dictate your mindset, speak a powerful decree into the ether. Say something like, "I am wealthy in spirit, and I command my abundance to manifest today." This declaration is not about pretending your current reality doesn't exist. It is about aligning yourself with the truth of your divine nature, which is already complete in the invisible realm. Another key strategy is to eliminate unconscious speech patterns that reinforce lack. Whenever you catch yourself slipping into phrases like, "I hope things get better," or "I'm trying to make ends meet," pause and reframe the statement. Replace "I hope" with "I command," and replace "trying" with "I am." Instead of saying, "I hope I get a raise," say, "I command my financial increase to arrive now." Instead of saying, "I'm trying to get out of debt," say, "I am free from financial bondage." This shift in language is not just about positive thinking. It is about aligning your speech with the creative laws of the universe. Your words are not just expressions of your current reality. They are the very mechanism through which you shape your future. By consistently speaking from your divine identity, rather than your circumstances, you begin to dismantle the limitations you've been unknowingly reinforcing and open the door to the abundance that has always been yours. Fear and doubt are the most insidious enemies of financial transformation. They do not announce themselves with dramatic warnings or overt threats. Instead, they whisper in the back of your mind, disguised as wisdom, caution, and realism. These internal saboteurs work subtly, infiltrating your thoughts with seemingly reasonable concerns that undermine your spoken declarations. They tell you, "What if this doesn't work?" Or, "Maybe you should be more practical." Or, "I don't want to get my hopes up again." These thoughts appear so logical, so protective, so mature that most people welcome them as signs of wisdom, rather than recognizing them for what they truly are: spiritual sabotage, designed to cancel your breakthrough. The moment you declare, "I am abundantly supplied," fear begins its quiet campaign of resistance. It presents arguments that seem rational. But your bank balance doesn't reflect that yet. Or, what if you're just fooling yourself? It waits until you've spoken your decree with confidence, then sneaks in with concerns about timing, practicality, or past failures. It tempts you to qualify your declarations with phrases like, "I hope," or "I wish," which weaken the authority of your words. It convinces you that doubt is a necessary safeguard against disappointment, when in reality, it is the very force that prevents your declarations from manifesting. This internal conflict is the battleground where financial breakthroughs are won or lost. The universe does not distinguish between what you say aloud and what you allow to dominate your inner dialogue. If your spoken declarations are powerful, but your private thoughts are filled with doubt, you create spiritual interference that cancels the very abundance you're trying to attract. The key to overcoming this sabotage is recognizing that fear is not your ally. It is a reversal spell that systematically undoes every decree you've planted through your spoken word. To protect your declarations, you must develop what I call spiritual discernment, the ability to recognize when seemingly logical thoughts are actually fear-based reversals designed to cancel your spoken authority. When fear whispers, "Maybe you should temper your expectations," respond with unwavering faith. When doubt suggests, "It's been weeks and nothing has changed," remind yourself that delay is not denial. When your mind tries to negotiate with limitation, refuse to engage. The moment you stop entertaining these fear-based thoughts and instead reinforce your spoken declarations with unwavering belief, you begin to dismantle the internal barriers that have been blocking your financial breakthrough. The most critical moment in determining your financial reality occurs within the first few seconds of consciousness each morning. This is not about motivation or positive thinking. It is about metaphysical mastery. The first words you speak upon waking become the spiritual blueprint for everything that unfolds throughout your day. When you speak with authority in the morning, you set the tone for divine provision to manifest in your experience. When you remain silent or allow your first words to be complaints, worries, or reactions to external stimuli, you give the universe no directive to follow. To harness this power, establish a morning declaration ritual that aligns your consciousness with divine abundance before anything else enters your awareness. Begin by taking a deep breath and speaking a powerful decree that sets the frequency for your day. Instead of reaching for your phone, checking your bank balance, or mentally rehearsing your problems, declare something like, "I walk in divine provision today. Money flows to me easily and effortlessly." Or, "I am abundantly supplied with every good thing." These declarations are not just affirmations. They are divine legislation that programs the invisible forces orchestrating your daily reality. The impact of this practice is profound. When you speak first, you call forth the spiritual forces that will shape your day. When you declare early, you establish the atmospheric conditions through which all opportunities, conversations, and circumstances must flow. Instead of allowing external stimuli to dictate your mindset, you take spiritual authority over your day, ensuring that every experience aligns with the frequency of abundance rather than limitation. But morning declarations alone are not enough. To maintain the power of your spoken word throughout the day, you must also implement a midday and evening reinforcement protocol. At noon, pause and reaffirm your declaration with unwavering certainty. Say something like, "I am still walking in divine provision," or, "My abundance continues to increase." This midday reinforcement ensures that your spoken decree remains active and unchallenged by fear, doubt, or circumstance. In the evening, before sleep takes you, speak a final declaration that seals your day's alignment with divine law. Say, "I thank the universe for my continued provision," or, "I am grateful for the abundance that flows to me effortlessly." This final declaration ensures that your subconscious mind remains aligned with abundance as you sleep, allowing the invisible forces to continue working in your favor overnight. By consistently implementing this three-part declaration protocol, morning, midday, and evening, you establish a rhythm of spiritual authority that overrides fear, doubt, and circumstance. Your words become the bridge between the invisible realm of abundance and the physical world of manifestation, ensuring that your financial reality aligns with the divine truth of who you already are. Most people view bills as burdens, sources of stress, anxiety, and financial strain. But what if you could transform these seemingly negative experiences into powerful opportunities to exercise your spiritual authority? The key lies in how you speak to and about your financial obligations. Instead of reacting to bills with fear, worry, or complaint, you can use them as moments to demonstrate your dominion over circumstances and command divine provision. The first step in this transformation is recognizing that every bill is not a threat to your peace, but an invitation to activate your spiritual authority. When you receive an invoice, instead of immediately reacting with frustration or fear, pause and speak a powerful decree over it. Declare, "This bill is already paid through divine supply," or, "I bless this obligation," and command supernatural provision to fulfill it. These declarations are not about ignoring reality. They are about aligning your consciousness with the truth that divine abundance is already flowing to you, regardless of what the numbers on the page may suggest. Most people make the critical mistake of speaking about their bills rather than to them. They complain to friends about how expensive everything is, stress over their mounting obligations, and allow their financial worries to dominate their thoughts. But when you understand the hidden truth about financial dominion, you realize that speaking about your bills gives them power over you. While speaking to your bills exercises your divine authority, every financial obligation is a stage for your word to perform, a doorway to abundance rather than a barrier to it. To take this practice even deeper, incorporate a physical ritual into your declaration. Place your hand on the bill and speak a blessing over it. Say something like, "I command this obligation to be fulfilled through divine timing and perfect means." This act of laying hands on the document while speaking your decree activates a spiritual principle similar to what Jesus demonstrated when he touched the blind and the sick, declaring the presence of divine supply where human logic sees only lack. The moment you begin blessing your bills instead of cursing them, something shifts in your relationship with money. You stop seeing financial obligations as curses and start recognizing them as opportunities to prove that your God is bigger than any amount printed on paper. Each due date becomes a deadline for divine intervention, and every payment request becomes a stage for supernatural provision to manifest through your spoken authority. This practice doesn't just change your mindset, it changes the very frequency through which financial blessings flow into your life. While spoken words hold immense creative power, the silent conversations you have with yourself throughout the day are equally influential in shaping your financial reality. Most people are unaware of how their internal dialogue reinforces limitation, constantly reinforcing beliefs that keep them trapped in cycles of scarcity. These unconscious thoughts, what I call spiritual static, can silently cancel the power of even the most intentional spoken declarations. Consider this scenario. You wake up and speak a powerful decree, declaring, "I am abundantly supplied." You feel confident and aligned with abundance as you start your day. But then, later in the afternoon, an unexpected expense appears, and your mind immediately reacts with, "This is going to ruin my budget." Or, "I don't know how I'll afford this." Even though these thoughts are never spoken aloud, they carry the same creative weight as your morning declaration. The universe does not distinguish between your external words and your internal monologue. It responds to the total vibrational frequency you emit, including the silent agreements you make with limitation. This is why many people struggle to see tangible results from their spoken declarations. They may speak abundance in the morning, but spend the rest of the day mentally rehearsing lack. Every time they think, "I hope this works. What if I'm wrong?" Or, "I don't want to get my hopes up again." They are reinforcing doubt rather than faith. These internal contradictions create what I call spiritual interference, disrupting the very forces that were responding to their spoken decrees. The key to financial transformation lies in maintaining outer alignment. Your spoken words must be supported by consistent internal dialogue that reinforces your declarations rather than undermines them. When you catch yourself slipping into thoughts like, "I can't afford this," immediately replace them with, "I am abundantly supplied." When fear whispers, "What if nothing changes?" counter it with, "I command my abundance to manifest now." This conscious effort to align your inner speech with your spoken declarations ensures that your entire being is working in harmony to bring your financial reality into alignment with divine truth. Developing this level of awareness requires what I call consciousness discipline. The ability to monitor and redirect your thoughts, the same way you would guard your spoken words. Every time you notice a limiting thought, pause and consciously choose a thought that supports your financial breakthrough. Over time, this practice rewires your subconscious mind, ensuring that your inner dialogue consistently reinforces the abundance you are declaring. When your spoken words and private thoughts align, you create a powerful vibrational frequency that the universe cannot ignore. Because in God's economy, aligned consciousness always precedes manifestation. To harness the full power of spoken manifestation, consistency is key. The 21-Day Wealth Declaration Protocol is a structured practice designed to reprogram your financial reality by aligning your speech with divine law. This protocol is based on the principle that repetition creates rhythm, and rhythm establishes spiritual law. By consistently declaring specific wealth affirmations at precise intervals throughout the day, you begin to shift your consciousness from lack to abundance, allowing financial breakthrough to manifest in your life. The foundation of this protocol is 3 core declarations. First, God is my instant and unfailing supply. This declaration establishes your source. It is not a request for supply. It is an announcement of what already is. By speaking this with authority, you align yourself with the infinite reservoir of divine abundance that never runs dry, never delays, and never fails to provide exactly what you need when you need it. Second, I walk in rivers of money flowing from the unseen. This declaration creates flow. Instead of identifying as someone who lacks resources, you declare yourself as someone who moves through abundance, like a natural element. You are not hoping for money to come. You are declaring that you already exist, in a constant stream of divine provision that flows effortlessly from the invisible realm into your tangible experience. Third, all doors are open. All channels are free. This declaration removes obstacles. Instead of asking for doors to open, you command that they already are open, dissolving every barrier, bottleneck, and restriction between you and your financial breakthrough. You are not waiting for circumstances to improve. You are decreeing that the path to your abundance is already clear. To implement this protocol, speak each of these declarations 3 times a day, at morning, midday, and night, for 21 consecutive days. The timing is crucial. Morning declarations set the tone for your day. Midday declarations reinforce your alignment. And evening declarations seal your consciousness in abundance as you sleep. The transformation that occurs through this practice is profound. Your mind begins operating from abundance frequency, rather than lack frequency. Your emotions start expecting provision, rather than fearing shortage. And your actions automatically align with someone who knows their supply is guaranteed. As you maintain this rhythm without contradiction, refusing to entertain limiting thoughts or speak words of lack, you begin to shift from reacting to circumstances to commanding them. This protocol is not about positive thinking or wishful hoping. It is about exercising divine authority through consistent declaration. By the end of the 21 days, you will notice a shift, not because the universe has changed, but because your spoken word has reprogrammed your reality to align with the wealth that has always been yours. While structured declarations and disciplined speech patterns are essential for financial transformation, the most insidious form of sabotage often occurs in the least guarded moments. Casual conversations, social interactions, and offhand remarks about money. These seemingly harmless exchanges have the power to completely cancel the effects of your intentional declarations, creating spiritual interference that blocks the flow of abundance. Consider the common scenario. You've been practicing your 21-day wealth declaration protocol with discipline, speaking from divine authority each morning, reinforcing your alignment throughout the day, and sealing your consciousness in abundance each night. Yet, during a lunch break with friends, you jokingly say, "I'm so broke right now," or "I can't afford anything these days." To the casual observer, these comments appear light-hearted, even relatable. But in the realm of divine law, they are powerful decrees that reinforce lack. The universe does not distinguish between what you say in private and what you say in public, nor does it differentiate between serious declarations and offhand remarks. Every word you speak carries creative authority, and every casual comment about money has the potential to undo weeks of intentional alignment. This is why many people struggle to see tangible results from their spoken declarations. They maintain discipline in their formal affirmations, but unknowingly sabotage their progress. Through unconscious speech patterns in social settings, they laugh about being poor, joke about expensive gas prices, or make self-deprecating comments about their financial struggles, all under the guise of humor or relatability. What they fail to recognize is that these statements are not just expressions of temporary hardship, they are spiritual reversals that reinforce the very limitations they are trying to overcome. The key to maintaining financial breakthrough lies in recognizing that words are not just communication tools. They are world-building instruments. Every sentence you utter is either constructing the financial reality you desire or reinforcing the limitation you are trying to escape. This means that humor, sarcasm, and casual conversations about money must be approached with the same level of intentionality as your formal declarations. If you truly want to shift your financial reality, you must become selective about what exits your mouth, ensuring that every word aligns with the abundance you are calling forth. By guarding your speech in social interactions and refusing to participate in conversations that reinforce lack, you protect the momentum of your spoken declarations. Instead of making jokes about being broke, speak from your divine authority. Instead of complaining about expenses, declare your provision. Every word you choose becomes a building block for your financial future. And the moment you recognize the power behind even the most casual comments, you begin to reclaim the creative force that has always been yours. Your words are not just expressions of thought. They are the very instruments through which you construct your reality. Every sentence you speak is a command that shapes the invisible forces governing your financial destiny. The moment you recognize that your voice carries the same creative authority that spoke galaxies into existence, you step into a new level of mastery over your life. This is not about wishful thinking or motivational slogans. It is about understanding that your spoken word is the bridge between the spiritual realm of infinite abundance and the physical world of tangible manifestation. The journey toward financial transformation begins with a fundamental shift in consciousness. You must stop identifying with lack and start speaking from your divine inheritance. Instead of describing struggle, you must declare victory. Instead of reinforcing limitation, you must command expansion. Every time you say, "I am supplied," "I am wealthy," or "I command my abundance to manifest," you are not simply hoping for change, you are legislating it. The universe responds not to your emotions, your circumstances, or your past experiences, but to the authority behind your words. When your declarations align with the truth of your spiritual identity, the physical world has no choice but to bend and conform to the reality you are creating. This revelation changes everything about how you approach money and success. You no longer chase opportunities, you attract them. You no longer beg for provision, you command it. You no longer wait for external validation. You recognize that your voice is the highest authority in your life. The moment you embrace this truth, you begin to see the world through a new lens. Bills become stages for supernatural provision. Debts become opportunities for divine cancellation. Financial pressures become invitations to exercise your spiritual dominion. But the most powerful realization is this: you are not trying to become wealthy. You are already wealthy in the spiritual realm. The abundance you seek has already been allocated to you, in the invisible warehouse of divine supply. The only thing separating you from that wealth is the way you speak. The moment you align your words with your heavenly identity, the gap between your spiritual reality and your physical experience begins to close. You stop being a victim of circumstance and start becoming the author of your financial destiny. If this revelation has stirred something deep within you, if you are ready to stop confessing poverty and start decreeing abundance, then take action now. Write in the comments, "My words build my world," and commit to speaking from your divine authority every single day. Share this message with others who may be trapped in cycles of financial limitation, and let's begin a movement of spoken manifestation that transforms lives forever. The power to create wealth is already within you. It always has been. Now is the time to claim it.